So this week we're discussing chapter 28 of Old Path White Cloud. It's entitled Palm Forest, and at this point the Buddha has accumulated something like 900 bhikkhu who want to become students of his and follow him around. However, the group of people who were now following the Buddha had exceeded the ability of the villages in the nearby to sustain them on the begging that they had to do. So the Buddha decided to move to this palm forest, and so he met up with these Kassapa, and the brothers divided the bhikkhu into these manageable units, and it's almost like they were, creating the organization and ramping up the ability to teach, more and more people in an organized way. So I guess it really speaks to his ability to organize collectively. They traveled for 10 days to get to the place that they were heading, and every morning they would beg, and they had instructions on how to beg, to basically be silent and don't ask and don't act like you're not grateful for everything that you get, regardless of what it is. Go to houses that are poor as well as the wealthy, and when they would receive food, they would bow in thanks, and they would be mindfully observing their breath the entire time. So it was sort of a practice, I think, or a discipline they were learning to the way that they begged. And if they were asked questions, they would answer to the best of their ability, but they would usually refer them to the Buddha and say that he would talk about the Four Noble Truths, the 5 precepts for the laity, and the Noble Eightfold Path. And so they got to the palm forest. They would beg in the area, come back at night and meditate. And so everybody was always quiet, and it was very peaceful after noon. And so eventually this king, Siniya Bimbasara, had already learned of the Buddha's presence there, so he wanted to meet, and he brought his fancy carriage with a bunch of other dignitaries and notables who were with him, and I guess in his entourage. And when they saw Buddha, he was with that Kassapula, and that person had been a teacher himself. He was the one who promoted the fire philosophy that talks about how everything can be associated or equated with a flame. And the notables that were with the king didn't know who was the true master, and so the Kassapa basically got up and bowed and made him and lay down in front of him, prostrate 3 times, and so that cleared up who was in charge. And then so they talked about the Buddha, then went ahead and gave a speech, and this speech was another one of his lessons about the way of awakening, and how there are interdependent and impermanent. We're both interdependent and independent at the same time. And so, of course, the king really likes it, and he pledges his loyalty to him. He said he had 5 wishes in his life. One was to become a king. Second was to meet an enlightened teacher, to have a chance to show respect to a teacher, to have a teacher show me the true path, and was to understand the teachings. And so the Buddha accepted that, and so they were going to have a great big party, and they had plenty of time to set it up, and because he had decided he was going to stay there for 3 months through the rainy season. So that's basically what I got from chapter 28. Does anybody have any remarks or comments? Ashley, do you? No, not really. No.
Just for your background, that I understand in India during the rainy season that the insect die a lot on the street, and the monks do not want to step and kill the insects, and so they just reside in one place for 3 months. And also it become a tradition from April to July, from the Buddha birthday to the ceremony of the penance, which is about 3 months. In that 3 months, monks and nuns have to make decision where they're going to stay for 3 months in one place. Kind of like they take retreats. And so that you see the other 2 nuns that join our nuns over here, and they're going to take retreat over here. Of course, they have some exception cause that monk and nun have to travel somewhere, but when they finish, they come back and complete the 3-month retreat. And after 1 year retreat or 3 months of retreat, they deserve 1 year of monkhood. And so whenever you see the robe, you see the square, each of the square represent a year of monkhood. So the more square you got, the more senior you are. And also during that 3 months, the monks kind of like practice harder, so they increase their spiritual level too. So now we have like 900 monks already.
I think so.
Okay.
He may have gotten it up to 1250 at this point. But then the next chapter, which is, I guess this is the last chapter of the first book, so I guess it should be looked at as a significant chapter. And it really talks about the lecture that Kondana spoke in front of a bunch of bhikkhus, and this was their way to ordain them. And so he talked about the 3 refuges, and he spoke about the 3 precious gems, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And then he talks about how the Buddha is the awakened one. An awakened person is a free person, filled with peace and joy, love, and understanding. The Buddha is completely awakened, and he shows us the way in this life so that we may overcome forgetfulness and become awakened ourselves. And that sounds like the prayer that you give at the beginning and at the end of all of our meditations. So that's very similar, very close to what we do already. And if we, follow the Buddha, we'll find the way within our heart. And I think it's interesting also that they talk about how he talks about how all humans have the Buddha nature. So you have the potential to become a Buddha within you, and everyone does. And that's kind of cool because, like, if you compare that to other religions, when I read that, I was thinking about John Calvin from Switzerland, who there was determinism, which is where everything that happens to you in your life is preordained, and the fact that whether you go to heaven or hell has already been decided long before you live. And so some of us were bound for hell, and some of us are bound for heaven. And I think that's a really hard concept to reconcile, because you don't know if you were one who was bound for heaven or bound for hell, Yeah, and so I like the fact that it says that you could do it. Anybody can do it. You can, find these things within yourself. And I think that's a different, message from a lot of religions, where you have to receive the message, you have to understand it, and give of yourself into their dogma, their dharma. You have to believe their dharma before you will go to heaven. But I like that Buddha says that even if you never follow any of this, that you still have within you the potential to become enlightened and to become a Buddha. So I like that part of it. I thought that was and it's contrary to a lot of the current mainstream religions. And then he talked about the Dharma, which is the path. which the Buddha teaches to help us transcend the ignorance and anger and misunderstanding, and it gives us freedom. So the Dharma is the second gem, and then the Sangha is the people who are the community of people who are practicing. And it points out that if you're trying to learn this stuff alone, it's more difficult than you may think, and that if you have the support of other people who are like-minded and maybe who have thought of your questions or whatever doubts you may have, they may have an answer for you. So I think it speaks to the importance of having a community of people to help you, guide you in your way forward. And then he talks about how they have taken refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and they're basically now on their way. They're bhikkhus now, yes. And so there were two guys came in at this time who I'm going to call S&M. But S&M, Sariputta and Moggallana, yeah. And they were disciples of Sanjaya, and they listened to actually they saw someone begging and they didn't want to interrupt, and so they waited until the very end of the day when he was quit begging, and then they asked him, well, who is your master? And he told them about the Buddha, and they wanted to follow because they could tell by the way that the monk was so peaceful and radiating calm and joy that they wanted to try that. And so they basically said they wanted to join, and then they had to be freed by their master, and their master wasn't really thrilled with that. But he said, who was it? Oh, and so they asked, how would you explain what he's teaching? And they came up with that tiny little poem about, from interdependent origins all things arise and all things pass away. So teaches the perfectly enlightened one. And it that just registered with them. And how this was this because of that was that, and that was that because of this is this, and how everything is all tied together and dependent upon each other for the balance, I guess, and the harmony of the universe. And so and then they picked up 250 more followers who had been following them. And so now I think the last count, he was at 1,250. Yes. And so he accepted them as bhikkhus, and that was that when they reached that number.